It was always the same when I asked. "Don't pick me up from work," she'd say, her voice casual but firm. "I don't want you there, not yet." I respected it, at least at first. It didn't make sense to me, but I figured she was just trying to keep her space, maintain a sense of independence. And I let her have it, let her navigate the end of the workday alone, without my shadow hanging over her. But when you love someone, you can't help but wonder why they need that distance, what they are hiding in that space between you. This time, though, I ignored her. I was done with pretending that it was all just about needing some space. The truth gnawed at me, twisted itself into something darker. Something about the way she'd look at me when I suggested picking her up, the hesitation, the soft decline. Something didn't sit right, and I had to know. I had to find out what was lurking behind that mask she wore so effortlessly, like it was nothing at all. I didn't know why that day felt different. Maybe it was the restless feeling in my chest, or the uneasy silence between us when she kissed me goodbye in the morning. But something inside me shifted, and for the first time in months, I followed her request with a quiet defiance. I was going to be there. I parked just down the street, hidden by the corner of a small cafe, and waited for her usual walk to the car. The late afternoon sun cast a warm golden glow across the parking lot, a soft contrast to the tightness I could feel in my chest. The seconds stretched as I scanned the door of her office, my eyes glued to every movement. When the door finally opened, and she stepped out, I felt a wave of relief at the familiar sight of her, the same grace that made my heart skip a beat every time she entered a room. She looked up at the sky for a moment, as if she were grounding herself before walking toward the parking lot. But today, something was different. There was a tension in her posture I hadn't noticed before, a tightness in her step that I couldn't ignore. She was trying to be careful not to let anyone see us together. I leaned back into my seat, trying to remain unseen, the creeping realization settling in. Why was she looking around like that? She hadn't done that before. I waited as she made her way across the lot, but instead of heading toward her car like she usually did, she turned left. My heart skipped again. She didn't take that route. It was a shortcut to a side street, one I knew she never used. The world seemed to slow down as I sat frozen, watching her walk toward the street, the traffic blurring behind her. Then, she stopped. She paused in front of an unfamiliar car, and I felt my pulse quicken. A man's voice broke through the distance, and I couldn't make out the words, but I saw the way he stepped closer, the way she smiled at him. The kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. My stomach twisted. I couldn't breathe. I should have turned away. I should have backed out of that parking lot, driven away, and pretended I never saw a thing. But I didn't. I couldn't. My eyes burned as they stayed glued to her, watching every moment. Watching as she took his hand, allowing him to lead her toward his car. A sickening realization crawled up my throat, thick and hot. She had lied to me. She wasn't just avoiding me for her own reasons, she was avoiding something else. Someone else. And in that moment, I realized the truth I had been trying to ignore. She had been hiding something from me, something deep, something more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. I couldn't hear their conversation, couldn't read the expressions on their faces, but I didn't need to. The way she leaned into him as they got into his car, the way she looked back once, as if checking to make sure no one was watching, told me everything I needed to know. The world around me seemed to shift, the noise of the street fading into the background as everything inside me came to a screeching halt. There was no hiding from this anymore. No denying the truth that was now staring me in the face. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't make sense of what I had just witnessed. I had been waiting for her to come to me, to tell me what had been eating at her, to explain why she'd been pushing me away. But now it was clear, she never intended to. She never wanted to. She wanted him. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine's roar a sudden disruption to the silence that had descended upon me. But I couldn't drive away. Not yet. I had to see this through. I followed them. I knew it was dangerous. I knew it was wrong. But I couldn't help myself. There was something magnetic about the way they interacted, something darkly compelling about the way my heart sank deeper with each passing second. I kept my distance as they drove, following them through the back roads, the streets becoming more unfamiliar with every turn. It was as if they were deliberately trying to lose me, but I was too far gone to care. Every stop, every red light that I had to wait at, felt like a punishment, and I was numb to it. Where were they going? I watched them turn into a quiet neighborhood, and my stomach dropped. It was too familiar, a place I knew all too well. A place I had been to 100 times. Her parents' house. I pulled over on the street corner, just far enough to stay hidden, but close enough to see everything. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white. I felt like I was suffocating, but I didn't dare leave. She got out of the car, smiling at him, and walked toward the door. And then, just as she stepped up to the porch, I saw her look back once more, her gaze sweeping across the street. A flash of recognition. Our eyes met. It took everything in me not to drive away, to not just pretend that I hadn't seen any of it. But I couldn't look away. And for a moment, I was frozen, caught between the reality of the life I thought I knew and the cold truth that was now unfolding before me. She had been lying to me. And the worst part was, she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I didn't know what to do, or how to feel. But I knew one thing, I couldn't unsee what I had just witnessed. And nothing would ever be the same again. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, staring at the dim glow of her house, watching the way she interacted with him. There was no mistake. The affection, the way she touched him, laughed with him, and disappeared behind the front door, they were more than just friends. More than casual acquaintances. I knew that much without needing to see anything further. But what did it mean for me? The woman I had been so certain I knew, the woman I had spent years building a life with, had now stepped outside the life we shared. She was hiding it all so well, so effortlessly, and I had fallen for it. I could feel the coldness creeping in around me, but I wasn't ready to leave. I couldn't bring myself to move, as if staying there, suspended in that moment, might somehow give me the clarity I needed to make sense of the chaos in my head. What had I missed? What had I ignored? I replayed the last few weeks, months, trying to find the moments that should have tipped me off, the clues I might have overlooked. Her insistence on separate spaces, the way she'd become distant during conversations, and how she'd avoid answering some of my questions. It wasn't as though she had stopped loving me, no, there was something more insidious at play. She was playing a game. But for what reason? And who was this other man in her life? The guy was a stranger to me, no one I recognized, but the way they were together, I felt like I should have known him. Maybe not him, but someone like him. Someone she had been hiding for so long. The thought was enough to make me sick. As I sat there, struggling with the storm of emotions brewing inside me, I heard my phone buzz in my pocket. I flinched, momentarily panicked, like I was caught doing something wrong. I looked down, and my chest tightened. It was a text from her, "I'm home, see you in a bit, red heart hash." I should have felt comforted. After all, I had been waiting for her, waiting to pick her up, and here she was, texting me to tell me she was home. But instead, it was like a punch to the gut. I was sitting just a few streets away, a spectator in the life we were supposed to share. She didn't know I was there, watching her, and I couldn't help but wonder how many other moments she had lived without me knowing. How many times had I been left in the dark? I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the screen. It felt wrong to reply. I didn't know how to respond, how to act normal when the world felt like it was slipping away beneath me. So, I didn't respond at all. I left it there, unread, like the empty space between us. As the minutes passed, the knot in my stomach only tightened, and I realized that this wasn't just a betrayal, it was the complete erasure of everything I thought we had. This man, whoever he was living in the shadows of our relationship, right under my nose. He was a ghost she had allowed into our lives, and it made me question everything. How long had this been going on? I watched the front door of her house for a while, waiting for a sign, any sign, that I was just overreacting. But the longer I waited, the more the doubt consumed me. There was no turning back. There was no world where this was a misunderstanding. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I started my car and pulled away, my mind spinning in 1,000 different directions. I didn't want to go home, not yet, but I didn't know where else to go. I needed answers, the truth, and I wasn't going to get them by sitting in my car, hiding like a coward. I drove aimlessly for a while, not caring where I ended up. Eventually, I found myself in front of a small park, empty except for a few scattered benches and the occasional jogger. The quiet here was suffocating, almost as if the whole world were holding its breath. I parked the car and just sat there for a while, trying to get my thoughts in order. What now? I could confront her. I could call her right now and demand answers. But something told me that wasn't the right approach. No, this wasn't something that could be fixed with a confrontation. She would just lie to me again, deny it, and I'd be left standing there with nothing but my shattered heart and her promises. So, I sat until the sun began to dip beneath the horizon, until the sky changed from a soft blue to a deep, ominous purple. The weight of the moment settled over me, and I knew that there was no turning back now. I couldn't live with the uncertainty. I couldn't live with the feeling of being the fool anymore. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the small notebook I kept there. It had become a habit over the years, writing down my thoughts whenever I couldn't process them fully. But today, I knew the words wouldn't be enough to make sense of what I had seen. The anger, the betrayal, it wasn't something I could just scribble onto a page and forget. No, it was too big, too real. I thought of all the good times we'd had, the laughter, the promises we made to each other. I thought of the way she used to look at me, how I had been her world, and she had been mine. But now, all of it felt like a lie. She had built a world that didn't include me. She had built it without me. With a deep breath, I closed the notebook, shoved it back into the compartment, and drove home. I wasn't ready to face her, but I knew I had to. I didn't know what I was going to say, or what I was going to do, but I was done pretending. This thing between us, it wasn't just about what she had done. It was about the trust that had been shattered. And no matter how much I loved her, no matter how much I wanted to believe she hadn't crossed that line, the evidence was right there in front of me. And I couldn't ignore it anymore. The drive home felt like I was walking through a fog, everything moving in slow motion, my thoughts spiraling. As I approached the front door, my heart began to race, thudding painfully against my chest. I knew what I had to do. There was no more running, no more denying what I had seen. But facing her after what I had just witnessed felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that one wrong step would send me tumbling into the unknown. I walked inside, the familiar scent of her perfume filling the air, masking the unease that clung to me like a second skin. It was as if nothing had changed. The house looked the same, her shoes by the door, the jacket she had carelessly thrown over the couch, the sound of the TV in the background. It should have been comforting, but instead, it made everything feel worse. It felt like a mask, hiding something I wasn't supposed to see. She was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared something. The light from the window reflected off her hair, giving her an almost ethereal glow. It made my heart ache in the most painful way, the contrast between the woman I had fallen in love with and the reality of who she had become. I lingered at the doorway, trying to find the words, but the heaviness in my chest made it almost impossible to breathe. She turned around and smiled at me, that same smile that used to light up my world. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice sweet and casual. The word babe hit me like a punch to the gut. It felt so wrong now, like it had no meaning left. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to speak, but my voice was hoarse, shaky. "Who's he?" The words were out before I could stop them. I hadn't meant to sound so cold, so accusatory, but the truth hung between us like a thick, suffocating fog. She froze, the smile faltering for a split second before she quickly regained her composure. "What?" she asked, a little too casually, as if she hadn't heard me correctly. But I could see it in her eyes, there was something behind her gaze, something she didn't want me to see. "The man in the restaurant," I said, my voice steady now, though the storm inside me threatened to tear me apart. "The one you were with. Who is he?" She shifted uncomfortably, her fingers brushing the edge of the counter as if she were looking for something to hold on to. "You've been hiding him," I cut her off. "I saw you. Don't lie to me." Her face went pale, and for a brief moment, she looked like a stranger, someone I didn't recognize. She opened her mouth, closed it again, and then sighed deeply. "It's not what you think," she said quietly, her eyes not meeting mine. My chest tightened. "Then what is it?" "Because it sure as hell looked like something. You were laughing, touching him, looking at him like you never look at me." Her shoulders slumped, and she finally met my gaze. There was guilt there, but also something else, regret? Fear? I wasn't sure. But whatever it was, it hit me harder than the words she had yet to say. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "let me explain." I nodded, though every part of me wanted to walk away. I needed to hear it from her, even if it broke me. I needed to know what had been going on behind my back, what had changed. So I waited. "I never wanted you to find out like this," she started, her eyes flickering with something that looked like sadness. "I never wanted to hurt you." My heart ached, the old wounds opening up again, fresh and raw. She wasn't making it better. She wasn't making it easier. "Then why did you hide it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why keep it from me? Why not tell me the truth from the start?" "I didn't know how," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "It started out as something innocent. Just a friendship, someone to talk to. But then it became more, and I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to tell you that I was falling for someone else." She paused, and I could hear her breath catch. "I've been so confused, and I hate myself for it." falling for someone else. Those words hit me like a freight train. It wasn't just an affair, it was something deeper, something more intimate. She hadn't just broken the rules of our relationship, she had torn it apart. I could feel the heat of anger rising in me, but I forced it back, forcing myself to listen. Who is he? I managed to ask, though it felt like my mouth was full of glass. How long has this been going on? She hesitated, and I could see the guilt weighing her down, but also something else. It started about 6 months ago, she confessed. At work. I never meant for it to go this far, but then one thing led to another, and we started meeting outside of the office. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to hurt you, but I know now that I've already done that. 6 months. 6 months of lies, of secrets, of everything I thought I knew slipping through my fingers like sand. I had been blind, so blind, and it hurt more than anything to realize how long she had been carrying this weight on her shoulders, how long she had been living a double life while I was left in the dark. I stepped back, trying to process it all. The shock, the hurt, the anger, it all swirled together in a blur. I wanted to scream at her, ask her how she could do this to me, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I just stood there, numb, trying to come to terms with the fact that the woman I loved, the woman I had built a future with, wasn't who I thought she was. She stepped closer to me, reaching out a hand as if to comfort me, but I stepped back again, not able to handle her touch. Not now. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice thick with tears. I never wanted to hurt you. But I've already done that, haven't I? I couldn't answer her. I couldn't find the words. All I could do was stare at her, trying to hold on to the pieces of the life we had built, but realizing they were slipping through my fingers faster than I could catch them. I had loved her, with everything I had. And now, I had to figure out how to live in a world where she wasn't the person I thought she was. Where she had become someone I didn't recognize. The next few days blurred together in a haze of raw emotion and forced normalcy. I still hadn't fully processed the conversation we'd had. It was like a movie that I couldn't stop playing in my head, each scene replaying, the hurt sharp as ever, gnawing at me like a persistent ache. I couldn't shake the image of her in the restaurant, her smile so easy, so free, with him. It felt like a betrayal that had cracked me open from the inside. The house felt different now. It felt like a stranger's home, as if the walls, once filled with laughter and love, were now only silent witnesses to a reality I wasn't sure how to face. It wasn't just the physical space, though. It was her. The woman I thought I knew, my wife, was a stranger now. I didn't know how to look at her anymore, didn't know how to talk to her. She had become an enigma I couldn't solve, and every word that came out of her mouth felt like another lie, another layer of distance between us. I woke up early that Saturday, unable to sleep any longer. The bed was too big, too empty now that we weren't sharing it the way we used to. I sat on the edge of it for a long time, staring at the carpet, trying to ignore the way my chest tightened every time I thought about her. She had apologized, so many times, but her words felt empty. Too little, too late. She was sorry, but for what? For betraying me? For ruining what we had? Or was she sorry she got caught? The question lingered, unanswered, in the back of my mind. I heard her moving around the kitchen. I didn't want to face her, but I knew I couldn't hide forever. My body was tired, my mind exhausted, but I had to do this. It felt like a reckoning that was inevitable. I couldn't keep pretending nothing had happened. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. She was standing by the stove, stirring something in a pot, her movements slow and mechanical. She looked up when I entered, her face soft with that expression she always wore when she wanted to make things right. But I wasn't sure anymore that anything could be made right. "Hey," she said, her voice barely audible, like she was testing the waters to see if I was willing to talk. I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. Her shoulders slumped, and she turned back to the stove. I could hear the faint clinking of a spoon against a pot, the sound too loud in the silence that stretched between us. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, but the words were stuck in my throat, like I couldn't find the voice I used to have. She turned back to face me, her eyes searching mine. "I think we need to talk about this," she said quietly, her hands wringing together. I shook my head, my chest tightening. "We've talked about it already, haven't we?" I said, my voice low, almost hollow. "What else is there to say?" She stepped closer, her eyes pleading. "Please." I looked at her for a long moment, her face so familiar, but her eyes were distant, filled with something I didn't recognize. Guilt. Regret. Fear. But most of all, I saw a woman who was broken in a way I hadn't expected. For the first time, I realized that maybe this wasn't just about me. Maybe she was falling apart, too. She was a victim of her own choices, choices she never thought would tear her down, choices she never thought would hurt anyone. But they had. They had hurt me in a way that felt like a gut punch. And no amount of apologies, no matter how heartfelt, could undo what had been done. I don't know if I can do this anymore, I said, my voice thick with emotion. The words were harder to say than I ever thought they'd be. They felt like they were coming from someone else, someone who didn't have the strength to keep fighting. I don't know if I can keep pretending everything is okay when it's not. You lied to me, Emily. You've been lying to me for months. Her eyes welled with tears, and she took a shaky breath. I know, she whispered. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen. I don't know what I was thinking. I was so lost, and I didn't know how to come back from it. I didn't want to lose you. I stepped back, unable to hold her gaze any longer. But you did lose me, I said, my heart aching in ways I couldn't even explain. You lost me the moment you let someone else into our lives. The moment you allowed this to happen. She closed her eyes, the tears slipping down her face in a slow, steady stream. I'm sorry, she said again, her voice breaking. I know that doesn't fix anything. But it's the truth. I never wanted to hurt you. The words rang hollow, like a bell tolling the end of something, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever this was, whatever we had, it was gone now. I didn't know if I could get it back, and a part of me was too scared to try. You don't get it, Emily, I said, shaking my head, the anger building up in me now, raw and untamed. I trusted you. I trusted you with everything. And you let someone else in. Someone who didn't deserve that trust. I know, she whispered again, stepping closer, her eyes pleading with me. But I never stopped loving you. I needed something I couldn't find in myself anymore. I needed to feel wanted again. I shook my head again, more forcefully this time. You didn't need him, I spat. You needed me. But instead of coming to me, instead of talking to me, you went to someone else. She recoiled, the sting of my words hitting her like a slap to the face. I was wrong, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I should have talked to you. I should have come to you first. But I was scared. Scared that you'd leave me, scared that you wouldn't understand. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You thought cheating on me would solve that fear? You thought betraying me was going to make you feel better? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she just stood there, her shoulders sagging with the weight of everything she had done, everything she had lost. And in that moment, I realized something. I had lost, too. I had lost the woman I once knew, the woman I had trusted, and I didn't know how to get her back. You've broken something in me, Emily, I said, my voice breaking for the first time. And I don't know if I can ever fix it. The room was silent then, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall, the rhythm of time passing without regard for the pain between us. And as I turned and walked out of the room, I knew there was no easy fix for this. Whatever we had, whatever we were, it was gone. And I didn't know if I could live with the pieces she left behind. The days following that conversation felt like a slow-motion car crash. I was caught in the aftermath, watching myself drift through life, numb to the world around me. Emily and I barely spoke. The awkward silences between us felt suffocating. Every time she looked at me, her eyes would flicker with regret, but I couldn't bring myself to meet her gaze for long. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was the feeling of betrayal, of shattered trust. And it wasn't something I knew how to fix. I spent most of my time at work, burying myself in tasks that required my attention. The office felt like the only place where I could escape from the chaos of my mind. Every time I stepped back into that house, I was reminded of the broken pieces that I was still trying to pick up. But despite all of it, despite everything that had happened, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stuck. I wasn't sure if I wanted to walk away completely or if I wanted to fight for what we had left, if there was anything left at all. My mind would run through every possible scenario, but no conclusion felt right. I was paralyzed by uncertainty. It was on the fifth night after the confrontation that I finally decided to speak with her again. I had to. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine or pretending that my anger wasn't eating me alive. And I couldn't keep letting her apologize without either accepting it or knowing whether I was even capable of forgiving her. I walked into the living room where she sat, curled up on the couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of the past few days had physically shrunk her. She looked up when I entered, her eyes searching my face, as if looking for something. Maybe she was waiting for some sign that I was willing to listen. Maybe she was hoping I would be the man I used to be, the man who could offer forgiveness even when it seemed impossible. Can we talk? I asked, my voice hoarse. It felt strange, like I was speaking a language I hadn't used in weeks. She nodded silently, sitting up straighter, her hands twisting the edge of the blanket. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words felt like the same apology she had given me so many times before, but this time, I didn't interrupt. I just let her speak. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve your love. But I love you, and I'm so sorry for everything I've done to you. I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant to destroy everything we had. I took a deep breath, holding back the wave of emotion that threatened to overwhelm me. My hands shook slightly as I ran them through my hair. I had been doing that a lot lately, trying to put my thoughts together, trying to find some kind of clarity. I don't know how to feel about any of this, I said finally, my voice breaking. I don't know if I can forgive you, Emily. I don't know if I can get past this. She looked at me with pleading eyes, her face wet with tears. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, she said, her voice shaky. But please don't give up on me. Don't give up on us. It was then that I realized something. She was scared. She was terrified of losing me, of losing the life we had built together. But I was scared too. I was scared that if I forgave her, I'd be setting myself up for more heartbreak. I was scared that I would never feel safe in this relationship again. Trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild, and I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her in the same way. I looked at her for a long time, and then I spoke, my words more thoughtful than I had intended. I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were. I don't know if we can fix this. Her face crumpled at my words, but she didn't look away. She just kept watching me, waiting for me to make the decision that would shape our future. Maybe we can't go back, she said softly. But maybe we can start again. From the beginning. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove to you that I can be the person you need. I love you, and I want to fight for us. The words hung in the air, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of something. It wasn't hope, not exactly, but it was something that had been buried under all the anger and hurt. It was a small, fragile thread connecting us, a chance, however slim, that we could make it through this. I don't know, I whispered again, more to myself than to her. I just don't know if I can trust you again. She nodded, her eyes closing briefly, as if preparing herself for the weight of my rejection. But when she opened them again, there was a strength there that I hadn't seen in her before. I'll prove it to you. Every day. I don't expect you to trust me right away. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. And I'm going to show you that I can earn back your trust, one step at a time. I stared at her, my chest tight, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. A part of me wanted to walk away, to leave it all behind. To protect myself from the pain. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, despite everything, wanted to give it a chance. I wasn't sure if I could ever fully forgive her. I wasn't sure if we could ever go back to the way things were. But maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild something new. I'm willing to try, I said finally, my voice quiet but steady. Her face softened, a fragile smile breaking through the tears. Thank you, she whispered. It wasn't an answer to all the questions swirling in my mind. It wasn't a guarantee that everything would be okay. But it was a start. And for the first time in days, I felt like I was holding onto something worth fighting for. But I knew one thing for sure, the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There was no going back to the past. There was no magic fix to undo what had been done. But I was willing to try. For her. For us. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. And as I sat down beside her, both of us too exhausted to say more, I knew that this was just the beginning. Whether it would lead to healing or more heartbreak, only time would tell. But for now, we had each other, and that was something worth holding on to.